So, Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, happy to be here. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
It's nice to see someone that isn't a member of my immediate household, and novel to see what someone from another country as well.
It's pretty awesome. This is like the Jetsons, if you ever watched that show as a kid. Pretty amazing.
This is it. Welcome to the 21st century.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, so I think the plan for today is just to talk a bit about the range, which really has sort of blossomed and bloomed. And I know you've got the Pro line we're going to talk about, or Pro range today. But let's start with a fairly general introduction from your side.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks. It's pretty interesting. We launched the shoes about 4 or 5 years ago, and we launched them on a Kickstarter. And originally I made a bunch of climbing shoes that were really terrible. And I took them to the trade show. There's actually a video online. It's the Wall of Shame. And I've got like all of our original models on it. Instead of the Hall of Fame, it's like the Wall of Shame. But they were really bad. But I was so excited. I was like, maybe, they felt decent, but they looked bad. And I was like, this can work. So I took them to the Outdoor Retailer show. And I think I counted 60 appointments between like different rep agencies and different like pro climbers that were coming in and everything. And like, different stores and all that, and everyone was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is so bad. So I actually left and almost gave up, and I thought like maybe we're just not supposed to do shoes. But we had just built our gym at the time, a couple of years prior, and I kept testing the shoes with different climbers there and good local guys and girls, and like they were like, man, they look really bad, but they fit really good and they're performing really well. So really from that stage to getting it to the point of like really launching, we took, that was the first step, getting from there into like the street and the street LV. And those two models are like really great for intermediate climbers, like a perfect gym shoe. You can transition outside with it. The price point's right. And for me, when we got those two models done, I was like, we did it. Like everyone loves them. Harder climbers like them, intermediate climbers like them. And then I had realization like hit me again when we started selling into the Japanese market. So we have a really big following in Tokyo of the brand, and they really like the shoes. But Katsu there and Toshi, one of their athletes that works with us, they flew into LA with me, and we met at the factory, and they were like, hey, we love what you've done. There's mega potential, but we want to create this pro line together. And I knew at that point, I was like, what I thought was, really, really high end, and they're great for intermediate. I was like, we have the pro shoes already. And they're like, no, you don't. Like, let's start over. Like updated patterns, updated colors, updated materials, update everything. So that's kind of how the pro line was born.
It almost sounds like a case of the more you think you know, the more you realize there is to learn out there in this world.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like every time not even climbing shoes, like, oh, I nailed it. It's like, no, you didn't. Like, and then you look back 3 or 4 years. But I think that's just part of like always pushing the envelope and always pushing things on this design or branding. You look back at your work a few years ago and you're like embarrassed by it. But at the time you thought it was great. When Toshi and Katsu flew into LA and we worked at the factory, it's pretty cool because they were able to be there with me, hands-on. We rented an Airbnb and we would actually like stay and we would hang out in the evenings. And in the morning, we would go to the factory and we would work on like a new pattern, a new idea. And then before lunch, we would leave and get lunch or whatever. And then we'd come back to the factory and they would have an updated sample for us. So we would take that sample around noon. We would drive to the climbing gym, like Cliffs of It or something in LA. They would climb in the shoe. Then we go back to the factory in the afternoon and give them notes. They'd make another sample that night and then the next morning. So it was really cool because we could get through multiple sample rounds all in one short trip in just a couple of days. So when we started, they basically said from street and street LV, what we want to do is have a more stiff pro model and also a softer pro model. So New Zero Pro is a step up from the New Zero, which is super soft. And Free Range Pro is a step up from Free Range, which is super stiff. So I'll get into a little bit of the technicalities of what we did different. So on the New Zero Pro from the original one, we actually split the outsole, which actually helps it feel even softer. And then in the front, we added more rubber coverage around the toe. So there's quite a bit more than the original. And on this model, we actually butted the rubber up. I don't know if you can see that where
Yeah, we got that clear.
So it's actually really hard to do. You have to get the toe rubber super thin. And then that crease or that seam, to get that to fit properly is not easy. So that was one of the big updates that we made. The other thing is the original New Zero has a really small fish hook midsole, just to give it a little bit of stability, but they wanted this shoe super soft. So we took out the midsole completely. So there's basically, besides the liner of the shoe, you've just got outsole straight to Rand. And you can see there's no midsole or anything in the shoe. So you can see it's ridiculously soft.
It really is at the rubber sock end of the climbing shoe spectrum, isn't it? But I know from having used rubber socks previously, they are flipping amazing to climb in indoors.
Yep, it's great. For volumes, smearing. We recently got a new head setter at our gym, and the style has changed. Obviously, updated indoor setting style, and everyone's moving to soft shoes so they can have fun and play on all the volumes. So this is the shoe I wear constantly, just climbing around at the gym. It's actually for how performance oriented it is. It's actually really comfortable. It's a little bit hard to get on, so the sizing is difficult online. So I wear my street shoe size, but a lot of people are going up a full size. But once you get your foot in, and once it breaks in, it's insanely comfortable. So the other thing Toshi did was he split the outsole into the two pieces, if you can see that, but he also redesigned the heel. So this fits like a Japanese foot really well. And we've noticed it's been doing a lot better in Europe too. It's a totally different fit. It's more of a ball shape, which is similar to maybe an old 510 heel or something like that. So those were the main changes and updates for New Zero Pro.
I mean, the thing about these shoes is they are so comfortable when you put them on. But like you say, sometimes it can be a little off-putting for people trying to get their feet into them. It's just because it takes that little bit of something. I tend to use almost a little bit of plastic or something like that just to slip my heel in. And then once you're in, it's almost like you can breathe again. And you get this thing that's obviously fitting, but really precise.
That's the secret of the pros, I think. And I didn't even know about the plastic till we were in Japan and at their trade show, and they had all the samples out, and everyone was putting plastic on their feet. They push the heel down, they drive their toe into the toe box, and then plastic around the heel would easily then allow them to use the pull tabs and pull it up over the heel. So it was really interesting. You don't see that a lot in the States, but it's interesting you guys see it there as well.
Hey, anything I can do to get my feet into shoes that will make me climb better, I'll stoop to any level. Hey, I guess soft shoes. So, for instance, I'm a lover of soft shoes for indoors. Outdoors, particularly in the sort of spring and summer months when I'm climbing either more in the mountains, Britain has a lot of, I guess, vertical terrain. So where you've got to use little footholds. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like that's where the other shoe that you've got to show us comes in.
Yep, exactly. So we wanted to have a stiffer version. So that's kind of the idea was, soft and stiff. So we created both, essentially at the same time or as close to possible as we could. So we took the original free range and kind of some of the same changes, honestly. We split the outsole again. So what we did as far as stiffness goes is he wanted the front to have a really stiff midsole, but instead of a fish hook just around here, we actually put the midsole through the entire piece to have the front of the shoe be pretty stiff. And then we split the outsole so that the middle is slightly soft so that you get a little bit more control instead of pulling a midsole through the entire shoe. But we actually put the midsole into the heel part as well. So the midsole's in the entire front, and then it's underneath here in the entire heel shape and wraps up around the outside. So it's kind of super stiff, a little bit soft, and super stiff. which is basically like the complete opposite of this shoe that's soft, all over.
And do these two both have a similar sort of fit, a similar last as well?
Yep, we designed them on the same last. So the idea is once you find your size in the soft or the aggressive or the stiff version, that then you can use that size across models.
That's really cool. I mean, it's funny because like when I started climbing, I'm sure when you started climbing, everyone just had one pair of climbing shoes and you just do everything in them. And you look at the modern generation of climbers, and I've witnessed people get to the crag with like upwards of 6 pairs just to find which like the heel would work best on one particular hold. But as a sort of, if you were going to expand from 1 to 2 pairs, doing what you've just described, having one that's maybe a little softer, one that's a little more supportive, is a really good way of doing it. And having the two just with that identical fit, I just think is a really cool design ethos.
Thanks. Yeah. Obviously it's going to feel a little bit different just because of the stiffness and versus the softness between the two shoes. But as far as like the size, and once you get fitted and they start breaking in, you'll really notice that you can wear the same size in both. You mentioned climbers. So when we started climbing in Southern Illinois, we had found we luckily had some other climbers like showing us what to do and like, hey, here's climbing shoes and here's this and that. But we were climbing at this area in Southern Illinois. There's no one around. We're walking through the woods. We had like crash pads and things like that we had found, or old couch cushions. But we met these kids from this small town of Goreville, and they had seen climbing on like this real TV show on the, like not even on the internet, like on cable or something like that. And we walked up on them. It was really hot out. Like it was towards the end of the season. They're in their underwear, all of them, climbing, and they had like one pair of climbing shoes, and someone would try the problem, they'd take them off and they'd switch them out. And we're like, why are you guys in your underwear? And they're like, well, it's hot outside. But it was interesting because slowly we saw like they had one pair and then they bought another pair. So then they had 2 pairs that fit each other. And then like 2 months later, they all had shoes, we'd see them, and then they had crash pads, and like, it was fun to watch that progression. So you try to, when you're designing shoes, you try to think about like, there's so many people in the sport too now that have no clue what's going on, no idea what's happening, and under that educational component and thinking about the beginner and the advanced, like from the guy in his underwear that has one pair of shoes that's 3 sizes too big, all the way to a pro athlete. We try to think about those steps along the way.
It's been an interesting evolution as well for me, seeing, as the rise of the sort of the gym climber as well that comes into the sport now, in that the traditional beginner would start from a UK perspective, like trad climbing on really easy terrain, and you do your apprenticeship, you learn all the ropes and these sort of things. Whereas now, of course, this modern generation of climber comes in and they're like busting out like V9 so the modern beginner now is like something like, these are by no means beginner shoes that we've run. They're in the pro line for a reason, but a lot of modern climbers are looking for that pro aspect because they're climbing at a remarkable level really soon.
Big time. Yeah. It's almost like the street and street LV we designed, those that are like that intermediate price point, intermediate climber, still aggressive, really comfortable. It's almost like, we've noticed a lot of beginners are actually starting there, because by the time they're through their rental shoes, they're ready to get something, much better because of the demands of the gym and how well they're climbing pretty quickly. They don't want like the $79 beginner shoe that feels like their rental. So it's kind of interesting. We really tried to focus there at the beginning because we're such an indoor focused brand that those 2 models were like, fit that climber perfectly. And then we expanded. We went up from there. We never really touched the entry level model, the really cheap shoe, just because we didn't feel like that. That was what was needed at the time.
And this, I guess, these 2 obviously fit that top bar, the one above the street as well. For those people maybe who have just started climbing indoors, but really are like taking it more seriously and pushing it to the next level.
Yep. Yeah. They'll get through an intermediate shoe, within their first first year or two. And then, that kind of, they'll work through that category. And then a lot of them are ready for the pro models pretty quickly after that, because they're able to see that advantage.
Hey, well, thanks ever so much for taking us through that, Dan. It's good to hear not just about the product, but as well, like about kids climbing in their underpants. It gives you like a good level of psych for the next generation of climbers out there, doesn't it? Because like there's still people out there that are still doing that.
We got pants, man. It's good. Yeah.
That's all you need. And a pair of the pro shoes, preferably.
You got it. Exactly. Yeah, no problem. Good to talk to you guys today.
Cheers. Thanks, Dan.